The guard's hand slammed flat against Michael Turner's chest before he could take another step. "Badge," the man said, already shaking his head, already done with him. Michael didn't answer right away. He stood there under the fluorescent lights of the distribution center lobby, breath, shallow ears ringing, staring at the plastic sign taped crookedly to the glass door, "Authorized personnel only." His badge was still clipped to his belt. It always was. Muscle memory, habit from 19 years of clocking in before dawn, but the barcode had been slashed through with a red marker. Terminated. Behind the glass, forklifts beeped. Pallets rolled. The building kept breathing without him. "I just need 2 minutes," Michael said. His voice sounded older than he felt, or maybe exactly as old as he was. "My tools are still inside." The guard didn't look at him. He gestured toward a gray plastic bin at Michael's feet. Inside it were his things, a pair of work gloves stiff with dust, a coffee mug with a chipped rim, a folded flannel shirt that still smelled faintly of motor oil and winter air. "You can file an appeal," the guard said, tone flat. "Through HR." Michael let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Appeal. The word tasted hollow. He had heard it before. Heard it when they slid the paperwork across the table. Heard it when the warehouse manager avoided his eyes and said the inventory loss had to land somewhere, and it landed on the oldest supervisor in the building. "You're saying I stole," Michael said quietly. The guard shifted his weight. A flicker of discomfort. "I'm saying I don't make those calls, sir." Sir. That was new. Michael bent down slowly, joints creaking, and picked up the bin. It felt heavier than it should have, like the building itself had put weight into it on purpose. When he turned, he caught his reflection in the glass. A tall man, shoulders still broad but slumped now gray, cutting through his hair at the temples, eyes bloodshot from another night of too little sleep. 54 years old, laid off, labeled. The door locked behind him with a click that echoed longer than it should have. By the time Michael reached the bus stop, the sky over Dayton had turned the dull color of old steel. Wind scraped along the pavement, pushing scraps of paper and last year's leaves into the curb. He set the bin down at his feet and sat on the cold bench, rubbing his hands together, trying to warm them. In his wallet were $18. 3 tens would have felt like hope. A 20 would have felt like control. 18 felt like something already slipping away. He thought about Lily, 9 years old, too smart, too observant. She had learned to read his face since her mother died, learned when to ask questions and when to stay quiet. That scared him more than anything. Kids shouldn't have to learn that. He checked his watch. 4:30 in the afternoon. Too early to go home. Too early to explain. That was when he noticed the woman standing a few feet away. She was counting money. Not casually. Not the way people do when they're bored. This was careful, precise, like every bill mattered because it did. Her fingers trembled as she flattened a 5, then a 1, then another 1. Coins followed. She lined them up on the bench between them. Quarters first, then dimes, then nickels, her jaw tightening with each clink. She wore a long coat that had seen better winters. Her hair was pulled back neat, but tired. Late 50s, maybe early 60s. The kind of age where people stopped offering help unless you asked for it directly. She counted again. Slower this time. "Damn it," she whispered almost to herself. Michael looked away. He told himself it wasn't his business. He told himself he couldn't afford to care today. He had done enough caring for one lifetime. The warehouse. His wife. His daughter. Caring didn't keep the lights on. The bus pulled up with a hiss of brakes. The doors opened. Warm air spilled out, smelling faintly of diesel and vinyl seats. The woman stepped forward, held out her hand, then froze. She pulled it back, staring at the driver through the glass. Her shoulders dropped a fraction. "Just enough." "I'm short," she said, voice low but steady. By a few dollars. The driver sighed. Not unkindly. Tired. Ma'am, I can't. I know, she said quickly. I know. I'll get off. She stepped back onto the sidewalk, the doors closing in her face. The bus rolled away, leaving behind a silence that felt louder than the engine had been. Michael swallowed. He thought about Lily's lunchbox sitting empty on the counter that morning. About the way the warehouse manager had said inventory discrepancies were serious matters, his pen tapping once-twice like a metronome counting down. He picked up his wallet. "Hey," he said. The woman looked at him, startled. Her eyes were sharp, alert, not broken. That surprised him. "I can cover it," Michael said, already pulling out the bills. "It's fine." Her gaze dropped to the money in his hand, then back to his face. She shook her head immediately. "No. I couldn't." "It's not a loan," he said. "It's just a ride." She hesitated. Pride flickered there. Real pride. The kind that didn't beg. "I don't even know you," she said. "That's okay," Michael replied. "I know what it's like to miss a bus." He held out the bills. All of them. $18. He didn't count them again. He didn't want to. The woman stared for a long second. Something unreadable passed across her face. Calculation, maybe. Or memory. Then she reached out, took the money carefully, as if it might disappear if she moved too fast. "Thank you," she said. Her voice was steady, but her eyes weren't. "You didn't have to do that." Michael nodded once. He didn't trust himself to say more. The next bus came 10 minutes later. She paid. She turned before stepping inside. "My name's Margaret," she said. "I'll find a way to make this right." Michael almost laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was familiar. "You don't have to," he said. But she was already boarding, already gone, swallowed by the bus and the blur of evening traffic. Michael watched until the taillights disappeared. Then he picked up his bin, slung it under his arm, and started walking. The road home stretched longer than it ever had. 4 miles of cracked sidewalk and quiet houses. Porch lights flicked on one by one. Somewhere a dog barked. Somewhere a television hummed through an open window. By the time Michael reached his street, the sky had gone dark. His legs ached. His hands were numb. He paused at the corner, breathing hard, staring at the small house with the peeling blue paint. Inside, Lily would be doing homework at the kitchen table. She would look up. She would ask how his day went. Michael closed his eyes for a second. He didn't know it yet, but somewhere across town, a phone was ringing. Somewhere doors were opening. Somewhere decisions were being made that would put 5 black SUVs on his quiet street before the week was out. All he knew was that he had given away his last $18. And for the first time since the lobby doors had locked behind him, he didn't regret it. Michael woke to the sound of his phone vibrating against the kitchen table. Not ringing. Vibrating. A low, insistent buzz that made the cheap wood rattle beneath it. He sat up slowly, disoriented. The house was still dark. The digital clock on the microwave read 5:20 in the morning. He hadn't meant to fall asleep at the table, but his forehead was still pressed into his folded arms, his neck stiff, his back aching in protest. The phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Michael stared at it. His first thought was the warehouse. HR. Some automated system calling to remind him of procedures he already knew he couldn't afford to follow. He let it buzz until it stopped. Lily's door creaked open behind him. "Dad!" He turned. She stood in the hallway, barefoot hair tangled, clutching the hem of her pajama shirt. Her eyes went straight to his face. Too perceptive. Always. "You okay?" she asked. Michael forced his mouth into something that might pass for a smile. "Just fell asleep out here. Go back to bed. You've got school." She didn't move. She stepped closer, peered at the table, at the empty wallet, at the stack of envelopes spread like a bad hand of cards. "Did you go to work?" she asked. There it was. Michael pushed his chair back and stood, joints protesting. He crossed the kitchen in 2 steps and knelt in front of her, placing his hands on her shoulders. She smelled like soap and sleep. "Not today," he said. "But that's okay." She studied him, searching for the cracks. "Are we in trouble?" The question landed heavier than any accusation from management ever had. "No," Michael said. He made his voice steady. "We're just adjusting." She nodded slowly. She didn't believe him, but she nodded anyway. "Mrs. Keller said she can take me to school if you're busy." "Tell her thank you," Michael said. "I'll walk you." That surprised her. Her eyebrows lifted. "Really?" "Yeah," he said. "I could use the air." By the time Lily left with her backpack bouncing against her shoulders, the sun had crept just high enough to paint the edges of the houses gold. Michael watched her disappear down the sidewalk, then turned back inside. The phone buzzed again. Same number. He answered this time. "Mr. Turner," a woman's voice said. Calm. Professional. "This is Rachel Cole from Midstate Distribution. Human Resources." Michael closed his eyes. Midstate. They never said warehouse. Always the corporate name. Like distance made things cleaner. "Yes," he said. "We've received your formal appeal," Rachel continued. "There are some discrepancies we'd like to clarify." Discrepancies. The word slid into place like a blade. "I didn't file an appeal," Michael said. A pause. Papers shifting. "Our system shows a submission last night at 11:47 in the evening." Michael's brow furrowed. He hadn't even turned on his computer. "That's not possible," he said. Another pause. Longer this time. "Then perhaps you should come in today," Rachel said. 9 in the morning. "Come in," Michael asked. "I was escorted out." "Yes," she said. "Security has been notified." Michael hung up before she could say anything else. 9 in the morning. Less than 4 hours away. He showered quickly, pulling on the same jeans and jacket from the day before. The flannel shirt from the bin still smelled like work. He hesitated, then put it on anyway. Habit again. Armor. The drive back to the distribution center felt unreal. Familiar roads, familiar turns, but his hands shook on the steering wheel. He kept expecting to see a police cruiser in the mirror. Kept expecting this to collapse into something worse. The lobby looked the same. Fluorescent lights. Polished floor. The security guard from yesterday nodded once and waved him through without comment. Inside the conference room, the warehouse manager sat rigidly at the table. So did a man Michael had never seen before. Dark suit, silver hair, sharp eyes that didn't blink often enough. Rachel Cole slid a folder across the table toward Michael. "We've reviewed last quarter's inventory losses," she said, "specifically the pattern." Michael opened the folder. Reports, numbers, dates. He recognized the format immediately. He leaned forward, scanning. "These losses aren't random," the silver-haired man said. "They follow a rotation." Michael looked up. "A rotation?" He repeated. "Every third Thursday," the man continued. "Different product line each time. Always signed off by a supervisor." Michael's finger stopped on a line item. His name, then another, then another. "That doesn't make sense," Michael said. "I wasn't on duty for 2 of these." "Correct," Rachel said. "But your login was used." The room went quiet. Michael felt something cold settle in his stomach. He flipped pages faster now, eyes moving connecting points. He saw it, the access logs, the overlap, a pattern that didn't point to theft. It pointed to cover. "Someone was using my credentials," Michael said slowly. "Someone with access to the system." The warehouse manager shifted in his chair. That's a serious accusation. So was theft. Michael shot back. He looked at the silver-haired man. Check the camera feeds from loading bay 4. You'll see it. Silence. The silver-haired man studied Michael for a long moment. Then he stood. Thank you for your time, he said. We'll be in touch. Michael walked out without shaking anyone's hand. By the time he reached his car, his phone buzzed again. Same number as before. He answered, breath tight. Hello, Mr. Turner, the voice said. Not Rachel. Deeper. Male. Controlled. This is Thomas Hale. Corporate security. Michael leaned against the car, the metal cold through his jacket. I have a few questions, Hale continued. About last night. About where you were. And who you spoke to. Michael thought of the bus stop, of the woman counting coins, of $18 leaving his hand. I went home, Michael said. I walked. And before that, Michael hesitated. Just a beat. I helped someone, he said. That's all. Another pause. He could almost hear the man on the other end deciding how much to reveal. Mr. Turner Hale said finally, You may want to keep your phone on today. The line went dead. Michael stood there for a long time staring at the screen. He didn't know why corporate security cared about a bus stop interaction. He didn't know who had filed an appeal in his name. He didn't know why a woman he'd met for less than 10 minutes had suddenly become the invisible hinge on which his week was turning. What he did know was this. Something had started moving the moment he handed over that money, and whatever it wasn't finished with him yet. The first SUV rolled onto Michael Turner's street just after 8:30 in the morning. It didn't announce itself. No sirens, no sudden stops. Just a slow, deliberate crawl past the Keller house, past the Johnsons' trimmed hedges, past the cracked mailbox at the corner that never quite stayed upright. The black paint swallowed the sunlight. Tinted windows gave nothing back. Michael noticed it because he was already on edge. He stood at the kitchen sink, rinsing a coffee mug that didn't need rinsing eyes drifting to the window every few seconds. His phone lay on the table behind him, screen dark, but heavy with expectation. Corporate security. An appeal he never filed. A voice telling him to keep his phone on. The SUV slowed in front of his house, paused, then moved on. Michael exhaled through his nose. He told himself he was imagining things, that unemployment did this to people, made them see threats where there were only coincidences. Then a second SUV appeared. This one didn't pass by. It stopped. Michael's hand froze under the running water. The engine idled low and steady like a restrained animal. A door opened, closed. Footsteps on asphalt. He shut off the faucet and turned. By the time he reached the front window, 3 more SUVs had lined the curb with quiet precision. 5 total, evenly spaced, blocking nothing, crowding everything. Across the street, Mrs. Keller's curtains twitched. Michael felt his pulse climb into his throat. He didn't reach for his phone. He didn't move at all. He stood there breathing slow, watching as 2 men stepped out. Dark suits, earpieces, shoes too polished for the neighborhood. Then the rear door of the 3rd SUV opened. Margaret Reynolds stepped out. She looked different than she had at the bus stop, but not in the way Michael expected. No power suit, no jewelry flashing, just a tailored navy coat, sensible shoes, hair neatly pulled back, composed, centered, like someone who belonged wherever she stood. She scanned the street once, then looked directly at Michael's window. Their eyes met. Michael's first instinct was anger, sharp and immediate. It rose before reason could catch it. What are you doing here? His second instinct was fear, cold, rational. 5 SUVs didn't come with good news. The knock on the door was firm but measured, not aggressive, not hesitant. Michael opened it. Mr. Turner, Margaret said. I was hoping you'd be home. He didn't step aside. You shouldn't be here. I know, she said, but it was better than calling. Behind her, one of the men scanned the street again. Another spoke quietly into his sleeve. Michael noticed the way they positioned themselves without blocking her. Protective, not dominant. You brought half the block, Michael said. Margaret glanced back, then returned her attention to him. Their precaution, she said. Not for you. That's not comforting. I imagine not. A silence stretched between them. The air felt tight like it did before a storm. I didn't ask for this, Michael said finally. Whatever this is. Margaret nodded once. I know. May I come in? Michael hesitated. He thought of Lily at school, of neighbors watching, of how quickly rumors grew legs in small places. No, he said. You can say it here. Margaret studied him, not offended, assessing. All right, she said. Then I'll be brief. She turned, slightly gestured to one of the men. He stepped forward, opened a slim folder and held it out. Margaret took it, handed it to Michael. Yesterday afternoon, she said someone submitted a formal appeal to mid-state distribution on your behalf. They used internal access points that shouldn't exist anymore. Michael's jaw tightened. I know. They also flagged inventory discrepancies tied to a logistics pattern we've been tracking for over a year, Margaret continued. A pattern that crosses state lines, multiple facilities, multiple companies. Michael flipped open the folder. His eyes moved fast, faster than they had in the conference room. He saw it immediately. Shipment codes, routing delays, the same kind of misdirection he'd noticed months ago and been told not to worry about. This isn't just mid-state, he said. No, Margaret replied. It's not. Michael looked up at her. So why me? Margaret's expression shifted. Just slightly. Something like respect edged in. Because the person who filed that appeal used your name, she said. And because they did it to force a conversation. Michael felt a chill crawl up his spine. With who? With me. The world narrowed. The SUVs. The men. The quiet street. All of it receded. You filed it, Michael said. Yes, you had no right. Margaret didn't argue. You're correct. Then why do it? Because if I'd called you, she said calmly, you wouldn't have answered. And if I'd shown up alone, you wouldn't have believed me. Michael laughed once, harsh. And this was supposed to help. It was supposed to get your attention, she said. It did. Michael closed the folder. His hands were steady. His voice was not. You put my name on a federal system, he said. Do you have any idea what that could do to someone like me? Margaret held his gaze. Yes. That stopped him. Because someone did it to me, she continued. Years ago, when I was trying to prove something I didn't have the power to explain yet. Silence settled again, heavier now. You helped me the other night, Margaret said. You didn't know who I was. You didn't ask. You didn't hesitate long enough to calculate risk. Michael's mouth tightened. That doesn't make us allies. No, she agreed. It makes you credible. Across the street, Mrs. Keller stepped onto her porch, pretending to check her mail. Michael noticed. He stepped out of the doorway and closed it behind him, putting himself between Margaret and the house. Say what you came to say, he said. Then leave. Margaret nodded. There is an internal investigation moving forward at mid-state, she said, and at 3 other companies. Quietly. Carefully. Whoever framed you wasn't acting alone. Michael's stomach twisted. He'd suspected it, but hearing it said out loud made it real. They used your credentials because you were thorough, Margaret continued, because you questioned things, because no one would suspect the man who stayed late to double-check counts. Michael's fingers curled at his sides. "They need someone to take the fall," she said. "And they need to make sure you don't talk." Michael stared at her. "Is that a warning?" "Yes. And the SUVs. Our protection. For how long?" Margaret took a breath. For the first time, something like uncertainty flickered across her face. "That depends on you." Michael let out a slow breath. "You don't get to do this," he said. "You don't get to pull me into whatever war you're fighting." "I'm not asking you to fight," Margaret said. "I'm asking you to tell the truth. That's already cost me my job. It may save you more than that." The front door across the street slammed. Mrs. Keller retreated inside. Michael rubbed a hand over his face. He felt tired in a way sleep didn't fix. "You used me," he said quietly. Margaret didn't deny it. "Yes. Why should I trust you?" She looked at him, really looked. "Because I came here in daylight. Because I didn't send a lawyer to do this. And because the people who are about to come after you won't ask permission first." Michael's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out. "Unknown number," he answered. "Mr. Turner," Thomas Hale's voice said. "We need to speak. Now." Michael looked at Margaret. She met his gaze unflinching. "Put him on speaker," she said. Michael did. There was a pause on the line. "I didn't realize you had company," Hale said. "You do now," Margaret replied, "and you're done circling." Another pause. Longer. He could hear breathing on the other end. Controlled. Irritated. "This just became a much larger conversation," Hale said. Margaret's voice was calm, precise. It already was. "You just lost the illusion of control." Michael stood between the SUVs and his front door, the weight of everything pressing down at once. His job, his name, his quiet life. He realized then that the night at the bus stop hadn't been the beginning. It had been the trigger. Michael didn't invite Margaret inside, but he didn't tell her to leave either. The SUVs stayed where they were, engines quiet, now presence heavy. Margaret's security team pulled back a few steps, giving the illusion of privacy without ever truly offering it. Michael leaned against the porch railing, arms crossed, eyes on the cracked concrete at his feet. He could feel the neighborhood watching, feel the story already forming without facts to anchor it. "Start talking," he said. "Slow. From the beginning." Margaret didn't rush. She folded her hands in front of her, steady, deliberate. 16 months ago, she said a supplier flagged a routing delay that didn't make sense. Product left one warehouse, arrived at another, but the paperwork showed an extra stop that never happened. Michael's head lifted slightly. He'd seen that before. Not the paperwork itself, but the gaps it left. The moments where numbers stopped lining up and everyone pretended not to notice. "I asked questions," Margaret continued. "Quiet ones. The kind that don't trigger alarms. I was told not to worry, that logistics were complicated, that I should focus on growth. And you didn't." Michael said. "No," she replied. "I focused on patterns." A car passed slowly at the end of the street. Someone down the block mowed their lawn, the engine's drone cutting through the tension like static. "The pattern crossed companies," Margaret said. "Different names, different industries, same routing software, same third-party auditors." Michael's jaw tightened. "Mid-State uses that software." "Yes," she said. "So do 3 others. All flagged in the same window. And you think someone inside Mid-State framed me because I was in the way?" Margaret met his eyes. "I think you noticed things you weren't supposed to. I think you were convenient. And I think whoever is coordinating this didn't expect you to be generous to a stranger at a bus stop." Michael let out a breath that was half a laugh. "That's a hell of a sentence." She didn't smile. "Why not go to the authorities?" he asked. "Why dance around it?" Margaret's gaze drifted briefly to the SUVs, then back. "Because the authorities are part of the delay," she said. Because when money moves quietly across state lines, it buys patience. And patience looks like inaction. Michael absorbed that. He didn't like it, but it fit. "And me," he said. "What do you want from me?" "I want you visible," Margaret replied. "I want you asking questions in places where silence has been the rule." Michael shook his head. "You already cost me my job." "I'm trying to give you leverage," she said, "and protection." "I didn't ask for protection." "No," she agreed, "but you need it." The front door behind him rattled as a breeze pushed against it. Michael thought of Lily's room, of the drawings taped to her wall, of the quiet routines that had kept his world small and safe. "What happens if I say no?" he asked. Margaret didn't answer immediately. When she did, her voice was lower. "Then you go back to being alone in this," she said. "And the people who framed you decide whether you're a loose end." Michael's phone vibrated again. He ignored it. "You put my name in places I can't control," he said. "You brought attention to my house, to my kid." Margaret's expression tightened. "I would never put a child at risk. Intent doesn't change outcomes." Silence stretched. Somewhere a dog barked again. "I'll pull the team back," Margaret said finally. "For now. But I need you to understand the timeline is no longer yours." Michael pushed off the railing and stood straighter. "I've worked warehouses my whole life," he said. "I know how systems fail. I know how people cut corners. But I also know when someone's trying to move me like a piece on a board." Margaret nodded. "And I know what it costs to refuse." They stood there, neither yielding ground. "What if I talk to the press?" Michael said suddenly. One of the security men stiffened. Margaret raised a hand slightly, keeping him in place. "That would be unwise," she said. "Because it would hurt your investigation," Michael pressed. "Or because it would expose something you're not ready to explain." Margaret studied him. Really studied him this time. "You're sharper than you let on." "I don't let on," Michael said. "People assume." "That assumption is why this works," she said, "and why it's dangerous." Michael thought of the appeal filed in his name, of credentials used without his consent, of how easily systems bent when someone knew where to apply pressure. "You owe me something," he said. Margaret didn't flinch. "Name it." "The truth," Michael replied. "All of it. Not pieces, not leverage." Margaret took a breath. When she spoke again, the words were measured. "There's a shell company," she said, "registered in Delaware. On paper, it provides logistics consulting. In reality, it launders inventory discrepancies into clean losses." Michael's eyes narrowed. "And you're sure?" "I'm sure enough to know that confronting it openly would collapse more than one business," she said. "Including mine." "And you're still standing," Michael said. "Which means you haven't been threatened the way I have." Margaret's jaw tightened. "Not yet." The phone buzzed again. This time Michael answered without looking away from her. "Hale," he said. "Mr. Turner." Thomas Hale replied. "I understand you're entertaining a visitor." "Entertaining is generous," Michael said. "You should reconsider your associations," Hale said. "This situation can resolve quietly if you cooperate." Margaret leaned in, slightly, voice clear. "You've already lost control of quiet." A pause crackled over the line. "Ms. Reynolds," Hale said finally. "This doesn't concern you." "It does," she replied, "because you allowed my company's data to be used as camouflage." Michael felt the ground shift under his feet. Data. Not just mid-state. Hers. Hale exhaled slowly. "You're making assumptions." "No," Margaret said. "I'm making timelines." Another pause. Longer. The kind that told Michael something important had just been confirmed. "You should be careful," Hale said. "Both of you." The line went dead. Michael lowered the phone. Margaret straightened. "They'll escalate now," she said. Michael stared at the street, at the houses, at the life he'd tried to keep simple. "You came here knowing that." "Yes," she said. "Then say it," he snapped. "Say what this really is." Margaret didn't look away. "It's leverage," she said. "And you're more valuable than you realize." Michael laughed again, but this time there was no humor in it. "I'm a warehouse supervisor with a dead wife and a kid in public school." "You're a witness who hasn't been discredited yet," Margaret replied. "And you have something most of them don't." "What's that?" She held his gaze. "You weren't greedy." The word hung there. Heavy, accusatory, clarifying. "I gave you $18, Michael said. "That doesn't make me special." "It makes you uncontaminated," Margaret said. "And that terrifies the people who need everyone compromised." Michael felt a strange calm settle over him. Not relief, acceptance. "So what now?" he asked. Margaret took a step back. The security team responded, immediately opening doors, shifting positions. "Now," she said, "you go about your day. You walk your daughter home. You keep doing what you do." "And you?" Michael said. "I prepare," she replied. She paused at the bottom of the steps, turned back. "I didn't come here to save you," Margaret said. "I came because you're already standing in the middle of this, whether you want to be or not." The SUVs pulled away one by one, leaving behind tire marks and a street full of questions. Michael stood alone on his porch long after they were gone, the quiet heavier than the noise had been. He didn't know how this would end, but he knew one thing with absolute clarity. The people who thought he was small had just made a very large mistake. Michael didn't sleep that night. He lay on his back staring at the ceiling fan, listening to it click unevenly with each rotation. The house had settled into its familiar nighttime sounds, pipes ticking, the refrigerator humming, Lily breathing softly down the hall. Every noise felt amplified, like his senses were turned too high. Margaret's words replayed in his head. Uncontaminated. Leverage. Standing in the middle of it, whether he wanted to be or not. He rose just before dawn and sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad. Not to write anything down, just to hold it there blank and waiting, as if the act itself might bring order. His phone sat face down beside it. He didn't want to see it light up. He knew it would. By 6:30, he was showered, dressed, and standing at the front window again. No SUVs, no unfamiliar cars, just the same street he'd lived on for 13 years. Same cracked sidewalks, same mailbox that leaned slightly to the left. Lily padded into the kitchen while he poured coffee. "You're up early," she said, rubbing her eyes. "So are you?" Michael replied. She shrugged. "Couldn't sleep." He glanced at her. "Bad dream." She hesitated, then nodded. "I dreamed there were people outside the house." Michael's hand tightened around the mug. He forced himself to keep his voice light. "People walk by all the time." She watched him over the rim of her cereal bowl. These people were watching. Kids, he thought. They feel things before they understand them. He walked her to school again. The air was cooler than it should have been for late spring, the sky overcast heavy. Lily talked about a math quiz, about a girl in her class who'd moved away without saying goodbye. Michael listened, nodding at the right moment, storing every ordinary detail like it was fragile. After he watched her disappear into the building, he didn't head home. He turned the other way. The Mid-State Distribution Complex sat quiet at that hour, trucks lined up at the loading bays, engines idling. Michael parked across the street out of habit more than strategy. He sat there for a long moment, hands on the wheel, eyes on the building that had taken nearly 2 decades of his life and discarded him in an afternoon. He didn't go inside. Instead, he drove to the public library. The building smelled like old paper and disinfectant. Familiar, safe. He found a corner table, pulled out his phone, and finally turned it face up. 3 missed calls. 2 unknown. One from a number he recognized but hadn't expected. Mid-state. Again. He didn't call back. He opened the browser instead. Searched for the routing software Margaret had mentioned. For shell companies registered in Delaware. For the names he'd glimpsed in that folder on his porch. Hours passed without him noticing. Patterns emerged. Not proof. Not enough to accuse. But enough to see the shape of something moving behind the scenes. Enough to understand why Margaret hadn't gone public. He wasn't special, he realized. He was replaceable. But his position had given him sightlines others didn't have. He'd known when counts were off. When explanations came too fast. When people who didn't belong on the floor suddenly knew exactly where to stand. His phone vibrated. This time he answered. Michael, Margaret said. No preamble. I wanted to check in. I'm not cooperating, he said. I didn't ask if you were. He pictured her somewhere quiet, controlled. An office, a car, a place where she could speak freely. They've started pulling records, she continued. Not just at Midstate. Michael leaned back in his chair. You said they'd escalate. Yes. And you're still doing this? Yes. He closed his eyes. I can't protect my daughter from this. You don't have to, Margaret said. I will. That's not your call. No, she agreed. It's my responsibility. The word landed differently. Responsibility. Not power. Not control. What do you want? Michael asked. I want you to keep doing what you're doing, she said. Quietly, carefully. And I want you to tell me when something feels wrong. That's it. That's everything. The line went dead before he could respond. Michael sat there staring at the phone. He felt tired in a way that went beyond sleep. Tired of being careful. Tired of being used. He left the library in the early afternoon and drove home, mind-racing, rehearsing conversations that might never happen. He checked the street before pulling into his driveway. Still empty. Still normal. Mrs. Keller waved from her porch. Everything okay, she called. Fine, Michael replied. The lie came easily. Inside, he found an envelope slid under the door. No stamp, no return address, just his name written in careful block letters. His pulse spiked. He opened it slowly. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a printout, a screenshot of an internal system log from Midstate. His login credentials highlighted, a note scrawled beneath it. We know you're looking. Michael folded the paper and sat down hard at the table. His phone buzzed almost immediately. Unknown number. He answered without speaking. You're persistent, a man's voice said. Different from Hale. Younger, sharper. That can be admirable. Michael stared at the envelope. Breaking into my house isn't. Door was unlocked, the man replied. You should fix that. Michael stood moving quietly toward the hallway. What do you want? To make sure you understand the scope of your situation, the voice said. You've been a convenient shield. You don't need to become a liability. You framed me, Michael said. You were in the wrong place, the man corrected. With the wrong habits. Michael's mind raced. If you think threatening me fixes this... This isn't a threat, the man said. It's a courtesy. Walk away. Let the appeal die. Take a severance and disappear. And my name. A small price. Michael laughed. Low. Bitter. You don't know me. I know enough, the man said. You gave away money you couldn't afford. You didn't keep copies of anything. You believe in systems. The call ended. Michael stood there, phone pressed to his ear long after the line went dead. His heart hammered, but beneath the fear, something else stirred. Anger. Not wild. Focused. He thought of Lily's drawing taped to the fridge, of Margaret standing on his porch calm under pressure, of men who assumed compliance because it had always worked before. He locked the door, checked the windows. Then he sat back down at the table and opened the legal pad. This time he wrote. He didn't know how far this would go. He didn't know who would fall when it ended. But he knew one thing with absolute certainty. He wasn't walking away. Michael learned quickly what it meant to live under quiet pressure. Nothing dramatic happened the next morning. No SUVs, no calls, no men in suits lingering at the corner. The absence itself felt intentional, like a hand easing off his throat just long enough for him to breathe before tightening again. He drove Lily to school instead of walking. He took the longer route, looping through streets he didn't normally use, watching reflections in storefront windows, checking mirrors at stoplights. Lily noticed. "Are we lost?" she asked. "No," Michael said. "Just trying something new." She accepted that, but she watched him the way she always did when his voice sounded different. After he dropped her off, Michael didn't go home. He went to a diner near the highway, the kind that hadn't changed its menu since the 1980s. Vinyl booths, coffee that tasted burnt and comforting at the same time. He chose a seat with his back to the wall. He ordered eggs he didn't finish and spread the legal pad across the table. What he wrote wasn't evidence. Not yet. It was memory, dates, names. Small things that had felt off over the years and been filed away because questioning them had never been worth the trouble. A supervisor who pushed shipments through without counts. A driver who always arrived early and left late. An auditor who never stepped onto the floor. Patterns emerged when he stopped pretending they were coincidences. His phone buzzed once. Margaret. He didn't answer immediately. He stared at the screen, weighing something that felt heavier than risk. When he picked up, her voice came through low and controlled. "You were visited." "Yes," Michael said. "They shouldn't have done that," she replied. "They did." A pause. "Did they threaten you?" "They made an offer." Margaret didn't ask what it was. She already knew. And she said carefully, "Are you considering it?" Michael looked out the window at the trucks roaring past, carrying things that mattered to people who would never think about how they got there. No. Another pause. Longer. Not relief. Something closer to resolve. "Good," Margaret said. "Then we adjust." "What does that mean?" Michael asked. "It means you stop reacting," she said, "and you start controlling what they see." Michael frowned. "I'm not trained for this." "You're trained to notice," she replied. "That's enough." He paid the check and left before the waitress could ask if everything was all right. Outside, the sky had cleared. Sunlight hit the asphalt hard, too bright, too normal. Margaret called again an hour later. "I need you somewhere tonight," she said. Michael's grip tightened on the phone. "I don't leave Lily alone." "You won't," Margaret replied. "I've arranged coverage, someone you trust." Michael thought of Mrs. Keller. "You didn't." "I asked," Margaret said. "She said yes before I finished explaining." That unsettled him more than the threats had. "What is this?" he asked. "A board meeting," Margaret said. "Off the books. I don't belong in a board meeting." "You belong exactly where people think you don't," she replied. Michael closed his eyes. "I'm not testifying. I'm not asking you to," Margaret said. "I want you to listen." The meeting was held in a private conference room above a hotel ballroom downtown. No signage, no staff, just a long table and a handful of people who carried themselves like they were used to being obeyed. Michael arrived early, wearing his flannel under a borrowed jacket. He felt every inch the outsider. He took a seat near the wall, legal pad on his knee, eyes down. Margaret entered last. The room shifted when she did. Not because she demanded it, but because she didn't need to. She took her place at the head of the table without comment. "This is not a vote," she said. "This is a briefing." A man to her left leaned forward. "You're bypassing protocol." "Yes," Margaret replied, "because protocol has been compromised." Murmurs rippled. Controlled. Careful. Michael listened. He didn't speak. He recognized terms. Roots. Software names. He heard his own suspicions spoken aloud in polished language that stripped them of emotion. Then a voice from across the table cut through. "This is all circumstantial," the man said. "We're risking exposure based on assumptions." Margaret didn't look at him. She looked at Michael. "Mr. Turner," she said, "you supervised floor operations at Midstate for nearly 20 years. Did you ever sign off on a shipment without physically verifying it?" Every head turned. Michael felt his pulse spike. He hadn't expected this. He opened his mouth, then closed it. He thought of Lily, of the envelope under his door. "No," he said. His voice was steady. "I didn't. And did anyone ever pressure you to?" Margaret asked. "Yes." The room went still. "Who the man pressed?" Margaret raised a hand. "We're not naming names." Michael swallowed. It happened more than once. And not just at Mid-State. The man leaned back. "So you're saying this extends beyond a single facility?" Michael met his gaze. "I'm saying it was designed to." Silence. Not disbelief, recognition. Margaret nodded once. "That's all." The meeting ended without ceremony. People filed out quietly, avoiding eye contact with Michael. He stayed seated until the room was empty. Margaret approached him. "You did well." "I answered a question," he said. "That's all it took." Outside, the city hummed with evening traffic. Margaret walked beside him toward the elevators. "They'll push back harder now," she said. "You understand that." "I already live with it," Michael replied. She stopped, turned to face him fully. "Then let me say this clearly. If this turns public, you will be targeted." Michael nodded. "I know. And if you walk away now," she continued, "you might still salvage anonymity." Michael looked at the floor, then back up. "I won't salvage my name." Margaret studied him. Something softened in her expression. Respect, unguarded. "I didn't expect you to choose this," she said. "I didn't choose it," Michael replied. "They did. When they framed me." Margaret's phone buzzed. She glanced at it, jaw tightening. "They've leaked a story," she said. "Not by name. Yet." Michael felt a familiar anger rise, but it didn't control him. "Then we move faster." She nodded. "Yes." When Michael got home, Lily was asleep on the couch, a blanket half fallen to the floor. Mrs. Keller whispered a greeting and slipped out. Michael lifted Lily, gently carried her to bed. She stirred, eyes half opening. "Did you fix it?" she murmured. He brushed her hair back. "I'm working on it." She smiled faintly. "Okay." Michael stood in the doorway long after she drifted back to sleep. His phone buzzed in his pocket. A message this time. No number. Just text. "You don't know how deep this goes." Michael typed back without hesitation. "Neither do you." He turned off the phone and set it face down on the dresser. Outside, a car passed slowly, then sped up, then disappeared. Michael lay down fully clothed, staring at the ceiling, heart steady. For the first time since the warehouse doors had locked behind him, he felt something like alignment. Not safety, not victory. Purpose. Whatever was coming next, he would meet it standing. The story broke before dawn. Michael learned about it from the radio, not his phone. He had the kitchen window open, letting in the cool air when the announcer's voice cut through the static with the kind of careful tone that meant lawyers had already been consulted. Sources indicate a multi-state investigation into logistics discrepancies across several distribution networks. While no companies have been formally named, insiders suggest internal compliance failures at multiple levels. Michael turned the volume down. Lily was still asleep. He didn't need her hearing words like investigation or discrepancies tied to his name before breakfast. His phone lit up anyway. Margaret. "They moved faster than expected," she said the moment he answered. "You said they would," Michael replied. "Yes," she said, "but not this messy." He poured coffee he didn't want. "Am I named?" "Not yet." The "not yet" mattered more than he liked. "They're trying to force you into the open," Margaret continued. "If you react publicly, they paint you as unstable. If you stay quiet, they define the narrative." Michael stared at the steam rising from his mug. "So what's the third option?" Margaret paused. A real pause. "You speak," she said, "but not to them." The knock at the door came before Michael could respond. 3 sharp raps. Controlled, familiar. Michael closed his eyes for half a second, then walked to the door. Through the peephole he saw a man he didn't recognize and a woman holding a leather folder, both dressed plain. Too plain. He opened the door only as far as the chain allowed. "Michael Turner," the woman said. "My name is Elaine Porter. This is Agent Brooks. We'd like to ask you a few questions." Margaret's voice was still in his ear. "Do not let them inside." Michael tightened his grip on the phone. "I have counsel," he said. "You can leave a card." Agent Brooks smiled without warmth. "This isn't adversarial." Michael met his eyes. "Then you don't need my kitchen table." Elaine glanced past him into the house. "Is your daughter home?" Michael felt something harden behind his ribs. "You're done here." He closed the door before they could say anything else, sliding the deadbolt into place with a click that felt louder than it was. "Good," Margaret said quietly. That was a test of what Michael asked, of how much pressure it would take to make you flinch. Michael leaned his forehead against the door. "They mentioned Lily. I know Margaret said." Her voice sharpened. "That changes things." "Everything already changed," Michael replied. "They just noticed." Margaret exhaled slowly. "Meet me in an hour. Same hotel. Private suite." Michael hesitated. "I won't parade Lily through this." "You won't," Margaret said. "Mrs. Keller will stay with her. Again." Michael ended the call and stood still for a moment, letting the fear burn off into something colder and clearer. Then he moved. He woke Lily, gently, made breakfast, kept his voice steady. He didn't mention agents or radios or investigations. He walked her to school like nothing was wrong. The hotel suite was smaller than the conference room had been. No table. Just chairs arranged in a loose circle. Margaret stood by the window phone pressed to her ear, listening, not speaking. When she saw Michael, she nodded once and ended the call. "They're fracturing," she said. Someone panicked. Michael sat. "That's good." "It's dangerous," Margaret replied. "Panicked people make noise." She handed him a tablet. On the screen was a timeline. Articles, anonymous tips, commentators speculating wildly. "They're floating your name in private," she said. "Not print? Not yet. But the pressure is building." Michael scrolled. "They're calling me a disgruntled employee." Margaret's mouth tightened. Predictable. So what Michael said. "I give an interview." "No." Margaret replied immediately. "You tell your story, but you don't perform it." He looked up. "Explain." "You don't defend yourself," she said. "You don't accuse anyone. You lay out facts. Calmly. Without anger. You let people hear how ordinary this is." Michael let out a breath. "I'm not a spokesperson." "You're not trying to be," Margaret said. "You're trying to be credible." There was a knock at the door. Soft. Controlled. Margaret's security lead stepped in. "They've requested a formal deposition," he said. "Voluntary." Michael laughed once. "Of course they have." Margaret nodded. This is the window. Window for what Michael asked. For you to choose how this defines you, she said. Or how you define it. Michael thought of the envelope under his door, of the call offering severance and silence, of Lily asking if he'd fixed it. I'll talk, he said. But not alone. Margaret met his gaze. I'll be there. No, Michael replied. Not as my shield, as yourself. She hesitated. Just a fraction. That would expose me. You're already exposed, Michael said. You just haven't acknowledged it yet. Margaret studied him, then nodded. All right. The deposition room was smaller than he expected. Plain, beige, 2 cameras, a recorder on the table. Elaine Porter sat across from him, composed, unreadable. Agent Brooks leaned against the wall, arms crossed. Michael sat straight, hands folded, breathing even. State your name for the record, Elaine said. Michael Turner, he replied. And your former position, floor operations supervisor. Elaine nodded. You were terminated for inventory discrepancies. Yes. And you dispute those findings. Yes. Why? Michael didn't rush. Because the discrepancies followed a pattern, he said. And patterns don't happen by accident. Elaine leaned forward. Explain. Michael did. He talked about timing, about software, about pressure from above to sign off without verification. He talked about refusing, about being sidelined quietly before being framed loudly. Elaine listened, took notes, didn't interrupt. And your relationship with Margaret Reynolds? She asked finally. Michael glanced briefly toward the corner where Margaret stood silent, composed. I met her at a bus stop, he said. I didn't know who she was, and now she's someone who understands what happens when systems decide people are expendable. Elaine's pen paused. You're accusing corporations of coordinated misconduct. I'm describing what I saw, Michael replied. You decide what to call it. The room went quiet. Afterward in the hallway, Margaret touched his arm lightly. You didn't flinch. Michael shrugged. I was done flinching. By the time he got home, the street was crowded. News vans, cameras, neighbors standing in clusters whispering. Mrs. Keller waved him over, eyes wide. They're asking questions, she said. About you. About Lily. Michael's stomach tightened. He knelt in front of her. Don't answer anything, he said gently. Please. She nodded. Of course. Inside, Lily sat at the table drawing. She looked up when he entered. Why are there cameras? She asked. Michael crouched beside her. Because sometimes grown-ups forget how to tell the truth quietly. She frowned. Are you in trouble? He met her eyes. No, he said. I'm fixing something. She considered that, then nodded and went back to her drawing. Michael stood and went to the window. He watched the street, the noise, the attention, the pressure. His phone buzzed with a message from Margaret. They've crossed a line. Michael typed back. So have I. He set the phone down and stayed where he was visible, steady, letting the world see exactly who they were dealing with. Michael woke to the sound of nothing. No reporters outside, no engines idling, no murmurs drifting through the walls. Just the refrigerator clicking on and off, and the soft tick of the clock above the sink. The silence felt deliberate, like the calm after something had broken and everyone was waiting to see which pieces would still move. His phone lay on the nightstand, dark. For the first time in days, no missed calls, no alerts, no anonymous numbers testing his nerves. He sat up slowly, letting the quiet settle into him. Lily was still asleep. Her door was closed. A small mercy. By 7, the first headline appeared. Not about him. Michael almost laughed when he saw it. A regional logistics firm announced the sudden resignation of its chief compliance officer pending an internal review. No details, no accusations. Just a carefully worded statement that said more by what it avoided than what it claimed. He scrolled. Another article, another company, another resignation, then a suspension, then a board restructuring. The pattern was visible now. Not to everyone, but to anyone who knew how to look. Margaret called an hour later. "They're cutting weight," she said, trying to see what floats. "And us?" Michael asked. "We're still standing," she replied, "which makes us inconvenient." Michael dressed and walked Lily to school again. The news vans were gone, but people watched from behind curtains. Some nodded, some looked away. Mrs. Keller squeezed his arm before he left. "You're doing the right thing," she whispered. Michael didn't answer. Right had stopped feeling like the point. At the school gate, Lily stopped and turned to him. "Everyone's talking about you." He knelt, bringing his eyes level with hers. "Are they being kind?" She shrugged. "Some are confused." "That's okay," he said. "Confused is better than cruel." She nodded, satisfied with that, and ran off to join her friends. Michael didn't go home afterward. He drove to a small office building on the edge of downtown, the kind that housed tax preparers and legal clinics. Margaret had sent him the address without explanation. Inside, the waiting room was empty except for one man reading a newspaper. Late 60s. Clean cut. The kind of posture that came from decades of discipline rather than youth. "Michael Turner," the man said without looking up. "Yes." He folded the paper and stood extending a hand. "Daniel Price." The handshake was firm. Not testing. Familiar. They sat in a small office with no windows. Daniel closed the door and leaned back in his chair. "I don't work for Margaret," he said. "I don't work for Mid-State. And I don't work for the government." Michael waited. "I used to?" Daniel continued. "Long time ago." Before consulting became a polite word for staying useful. Michael studied him. "Why am I here?" Daniel smiled faintly. "Because you're about to be offered something, and you should understand the cost before you decide." "Offered by who?" Michael asked. "By people who don't like uncertainty," Daniel said, "and who suddenly find themselves surrounded by it." Michael's jaw tightened. They already made an offer. "Silence," Daniel said, "and severance." "Yes." That was the soft version. Michael leaned forward, and the hard one. Daniel's smile disappeared. Reputation, access, a narrative that paints you as reckless, unstable, useful until you're not. Michael exhaled slowly. "So what's the third option?" Daniel nodded. "That's the right question." He slid a folder across the desk. Inside were documents Michael recognized instantly. Compliance reports, audit notes, names he'd seen before. "You're not the first person this happened to," Daniel said. "Just the first one who didn't disappear quietly." Michael flipped through the pages. "Why me?" "Because you weren't greedy?" Daniel echoed Margaret's words almost exactly. "Because you didn't take shortcuts. Because when they looked for leverage, they found none." Michael closed the folder. "This doesn't protect my daughter." Daniel leaned forward. "No," he said. "It doesn't, but it protects the next one." Silence settled between them. "I can't promise safety," Daniel continued. "I can promise structure, counsel, and visibility. The kind that makes it harder to erase you." Michael thought of the men at his door, of the envelope slid under it, of Lily's drawing on the fridge. "What do you need from me?" he asked. Daniel didn't hesitate. Consistency, truth, and the patience to let systems collapse under their own weight. Michael stood. "That's a long wait." Daniel nodded. "It always is." Outside, the city felt different. Not hostile, not welcoming, just awake. Margaret met him later that afternoon in a quiet cafe. No security this time. Just two people sitting at a small table with chipped edges. "You spoke to Daniel," she said. "Yes." "And—" "He didn't lie," Michael replied. "No," she said. "He rarely does." Michael stirred his coffee, watching the dark liquid swirl. "They're backing off. They're regrouping," Margaret corrected. "That's worse." Michael looked at her. "Why are you still here?" She met his gaze. "Because walking away now would confirm every assumption they've made about people like us." "People like us," Michael repeated. She nodded. "People who were supposed to stay in their lanes." Michael sat back. "They'll come after you next." "They already have," Margaret said. "They just don't know how yet." Outside, a car slowed, then continued on. No cameras, no spectacle. "When this ends," Michael said quietly, "I don't want power." Margaret smiled faintly. "Neither do I. What do you want?" She thought for a moment. "I want fewer people to have to choose between integrity and survival." Michael nodded. "That's a hard sell." "It is," she agreed. "But it's worth making." That evening, Michael cooked dinner for Lily. Pasta, too much garlic. She complained and ate it anyway. "Are you famous now?" she asked. He laughed softly. "No." "Good," she said. "I don't want to move." Neither did he. After she went to bed, Michael sat at the kitchen table and opened the folder Daniel had given him. He read slowly, carefully. He felt the weight of it settle into him, not as fear, but as responsibility. Outside, the street remained quiet. Inside, Michael Turner made peace with the fact that the fight was no longer about clearing his name. It was about making sure no one else had to give away their last $18 just to be seen as human. The first subpoena arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, slid under Michael's door with the same quiet intent as the earlier warning had been. This one was official. Federal letterhead. A date. A time. A room number that meant nothing and everything. Michael read it twice, then once more out loud, as if sound might change its weight. It didn't. Margaret called before he could reach for the phone. "I know," she said. "Daniel already forwarded a copy." "So it's happening," Michael replied. "It's accelerating," she corrected. "Which means someone miscalculated." Michael folded the paper and set it beside Lily's permission slip for a school field trip. The contrast felt obscene. "Do I need a lawyer?" "You'll have one," Margaret said. "Two, actually. One to protect you, one to protect the record. And you." A pause. "I'll be present," she said. "Not seated, not speaking, but visible." Michael understood what that meant. "You're ready." "I've been ready," she replied. "I was waiting for the moment when hiding would do more damage than standing." After the call, Michael drove Lily to school. He didn't take the long route this time. He took the straight one through the main roads, past the bakery with the burnt coffee smell, past the bank with the digital sign blinking interest rates. He parked, walked her to the gate, knelt. "Field trip money is in my backpack," Lily said. "I know," he replied. She studied his face. "You look like you're going to talk to important people." He smiled, small and honest. "I am. Tell them the truth," she said like it was the most obvious thing in the world. "I will," he promised. The hearing room was larger than Michael expected and smaller than it should have been. Long table, flags, microphones angled like they were waiting to bite. A handful of reporters in the back restrained alert. Cameras set, but not rolling. Not yet. Elaine Porter sat across from him again, composed as ever. Two other officials flanked her faces, neutral eyes busy. Daniel Price stood near the wall, arms folded, watching everything without appearing to. Margaret stood farther back near the exit, dressed simply, posture straight, presence unmistakable. Michael took his seat. He didn't fidget. He didn't scan the room. He rested his hands on the table and waited. Mr. Turner. Elaine began. You understand this is a formal proceeding? Yes, Michael said. And that you are under oath? Yes, Elaine nodded. We're going to ask you questions about inventory management practices, software access, and your interactions with certain individuals. If at any point you need clarification, say so. Michael looked at the microphone. Thought of the warehouse floor, of pallets moving in clean lines when systems worked, and chaos when they didn't. Understood, he said. The questions came steadily. Dates, procedures, names he recognized, and some he didn't. Michael answered carefully, not defensively. He described how counts were supposed to be verified, how exceptions were logged, how pressure changed behavior. He didn't accuse. He described. When did you first notice irregularities? One of the officials asked. Years ago, Michael replied. Not as a scandal, as a pattern. And why didn't you report them? Another pressed. Michael didn't rush. Because reporting required proof I didn't yet have, he said. And because raising concerns without evidence gets you sidelined, not heard. Elaine glanced at her colleagues. So you waited. I paid attention, Michael corrected. There's a difference. A murmur rippled behind him. They moved to the appeal filed in his name. The unauthorized access, the timing. You believe this was done to provoke contact, Elaine said. Yes. Contact with whom? Michael's gaze lifted briefly toward Margaret, then back to the table. With someone who already understood the scale of the problem. Elaine followed his glance. Her eyes flicked toward the back of the room. Ms. Reynolds, she said. Would you care to step forward? Margaret moved without hesitation. The room shifted again, subtle but undeniable. She took a position beside Michael, not touching him, not shielding him, simply present. For the record, Elaine said, state your name and role. Margaret Reynolds, she replied, founder and chief executive officer of Northline Medical Distribution. The title landed like a weight. Not because it was impressive, but because it was now unavoidable. Elaine leaned back slightly. Ms. Reynolds, your company's data appears in several of the logs Mr. Turner referenced. Yes, Margaret said, which is why I'm here. You're aware this exposes your organization to scrutiny. I welcome it, Margaret replied. Scrutiny is what prevents rot. A beat. Cameras clicked, quiet, but eager. Elaine nodded once. Mr. Turner, you allege coordinated misuse of logistics software across multiple firms. I described what I observed, Michael said. Coordination is your word. Elaine's lips tightened. Fair enough. They broke for recess. Michael stood legs stiff, mind sharp. Margaret stepped closer. You did well, she said. I told the truth, he replied. That's rarer than it should be, she said. In the hallway, reporters surged, held back by a thin line of security. Questions flew half-formed, sharpened by anticipation. Mr. Turner, someone shouted. Are you accusing executives of fraud? Michael stopped, turned. The hallway went quiet. I'm accusing systems of valuing efficiency over accountability, he said, and people of hiding behind those systems. Margaret didn't stop him. She watched, measuring the moment. Ms. Reynolds, another voice called. Are you cooperating with investigators? Yes, she said clearly. Fully. And why now? Margaret looked at Michael, then back at the cameras, because waiting any longer would make me complicit. The word cut cleanly through the noise. By evening, the story had changed shape, no longer a disgruntled employee, no longer an isolated incident. Names still weren't printed, but lines were drawn. Michael returned home to a street that felt familiar again, not watched, but awake. Mrs. Keller stood on her porch, hands clasped. You were on the news, she said. I figured, Michael replied. She nodded. You looked like yourself. Inside, Lily sat at the table with her homework spread out. She looked up. Did you talk to the important people? Yes, Michael said. And I told them the truth. She smiled. Good. That night, as Michael washed dishes, his phone buzzed with a message from Daniel. They're preparing indictments. Michael set the phone down, water running hands steady. Margaret's message followed a moment later. Tomorrow I step forward. Michael typed back. I'll be there. He dried his hands and turned off the light standing in the dark kitchen for a moment longer than necessary. He thought of the warehouse doors, of the bus stop, of $18 leaving his hand without calculation. He understood now that the smallest acts didn't change systems by themselves. They changed people. And sometimes that was enough to make systems crack. The press conference didn't happen in a ballroom or behind a polished podium. It happened in a quiet federal building with bad acoustics and unforgiving lights, the kind of place where words either held up on their own or collapsed under scrutiny. Michael sat in the second row, hands folded, spine straight, eyes forward. He wasn't the story today, and that felt heavier than when he had been. Margaret stood at the microphone alone. No security wall, no entourage. Just her, a stack of documents, and a room full of people who had underestimated how far she was willing to go. My name is Margaret Reynolds. She began, voice even unshaken. I am the founder and chief executive officer of Northline Medical Distribution. I am here because silence has become a form of harm. The room stilled. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't dramatize. She laid out timelines, contracts, data flows. She named the shell company. She named the software. She named the auditors who had signed without verifying and the executives who had benefited from plausible deniability. She did not name Michael, not once. When questions came, she answered them with the patience of someone who had already made peace with the cost. Yes, this will affect my company. Yes, I authorized full access to our internal systems. Yes, I understand the legal implications. No apologies, no deflection. Michael watched faces in the room change as the narrative lost its footholds. This was no longer about one warehouse supervisor or one suspicious appeal. This was about a network that had relied on quiet compliance and disposable people. When it ended, there was no applause. Just a low, unsettled murmur. The sound of something permanent shifting. Outside, cameras waited, but fewer than before. The spectacle had given way to process. Reporters still shouted questions, but they were narrower now, more careful. The easy angles were gone. Michael walked beside Margaret toward the car. You didn't have to shield me, he said. Margaret shook her head. You didn't need shielding, she replied. You needed space. They stopped at the curb. For a moment, neither spoke. Indictments will follow, Margaret said. Some quickly, some not. And me. You'll be offered your job back, she said. With apologies. Michael exhaled slowly. I won't take it. Margaret turned surprised but not shocked. I'm done working inside systems that only listen when they're forced. Michael continued. I'll consult, train, testify if needed, but I won't pretend it's fixed because a few people fell. Margaret studied him, then nodded. That's wise. By the time Michael got home, the street was quiet. No vans, no crowds, just evening light and the smell of someone grilling 2 houses down. Lily was at the kitchen table coloring. You're late, she said. I know, Michael replied. Sorry. She held up her drawing. 3 figures this time, one tall, one small, one with long hair, all standing side by side. I added her, Lily said, because she was brave. Michael smiled. She was. Were you brave? Lily asked. He considered that. I was honest. She nodded satisfied and went back to coloring. That night Michael slept all the way through. No dreams, no ceiling staring back, just rest. Weeks passed. The story didn't disappear, but it changed shape. Corporate resignations became court filings. Quiet settlements turned into public records. Training standards were revised. Oversight committees expanded. None of it felt like victory. It felt like work. Michael spent his days meeting with people who looked like he had weeks earlier. Supervisors, clerks, drivers, men and women who had noticed patterns and been told to ignore them. He taught them how to document without inflaming, how to speak without grandstanding, how to survive being right. Margaret stepped back from day-to-day operations. She didn't vanish, she repositioned. Oversight instead of control, structure instead of speed. They met less often now. When they did, it was quieter. Coffee, walks, conversations that didn't circle the same fires. One evening, months later, Michael stood again at the bus stop where everything had started. The bench had been repainted, the light fixed. People came and went without knowing what had passed through that small square of concrete. He sat for a moment, then stood and walked home. At dinner, Lily asked, "Do you still have $18? Michael laughed softly. "No." "Good," she said. "You already used it." He understood what she meant. The smallest choice he had made when he felt invisible had carried farther than any plan he could have designed. Not because it was clever, because it was human. Later that night, Michael stood at the kitchen window watching the quiet street, thinking about the men who had assumed he would disappear, about systems that counted on fear more than loyalty, about how wrong they had been. He didn't feel powerful. He felt grounded, and that he realized was harder to take away. If this story moved, you take a moment to like and subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments with these 3 words: stand for truth.